To everybody joining us from the waiting room. We are happy to have you here with us, and we will be beginning our workshop in just a moment. We are here for building inclusive and effective internships and capstones in innovation career pathways, and we are glad that you're here. So as we begin our workshop, I want to provide you with a little bit of information on the technical side of things. As you may know, we record these webinars so that we can post them on our website and make them accessible to you after the fact. And we also have available live during the webinar closed captioning. So if you would like to access the closed captioning, just click on the button in the upper left corner of your Zoom screen, and that will provide instructions for how to activate live closed captioning for the webinar. So we want to begin by introducing some of the folks who are here to facilitate and support today's workshop. My name is Annie Leonard, and I am the lead consultant with the Center for Collaborative Education, supporting the Innovation Pathways Initiative, Professional Development, and Technical Assistance. And I'm joined by CCE colleagues Allison and Phoenicia, who are here for any assistance that you might need today. So feel free to send a message to them in the chat if you have a question or need any technical assistance. I appreciate their being here. And then I'd like to pass to my DESE colleague, Jennifer, to introduce herself and any other DESE folks that are in the room.
Thank you, Annie. Good morning. Great to see so many of you here. I think we had 60 people register for it. So hopefully some more people will join us as we get going. Thank you for your time this morning. I think you're going to really enjoy hearing from our very august presenters.
Thank you, Jennifer. We know that this is a high interest topic and also a very broad topic. We're very happy to have two guest presenters and facilitators with us. You can see them on the screen. We have Shireen Tyrell from Burlington High School, who is one of our peer ambassadors and the lead for the computer science pathway there. And also joining us today is Dave Mora, who's the Dean of Students at Uxbridge High School. And you'll be hearing from both of them as we move through some information that is important for schools to consider while developing internships and capstones for their pathways. Before we dive into that content, though, we always like to get to know a little bit about who is in the room. And today, as I mentioned in that advance email that I sent out about this session, it's important that we are able to place you appropriately in a breakout room. So we want to ask everybody in the workshop to please rename yourself. So change your Zoom name so that it has either new or EXP for experienced in your Zoom name. And for today, we're defining new as anyone who is either a potential applicant in the application process or in the first year of implementation. And if you're in your second year or more of pathway implementation, then that would be EXP. So labeling yourself that way will mean that Phoenicia and Allison can help place you in appropriate breakout rooms. Also, just to get our brains activated this morning with the topic at hand, we would ask you to put in the chat your response to the following prompt. What would you look for as measurable or observable evidence of effectiveness and inclusivity in an internship or capstone? So we'll continue with some of our opening moves while you have a moment to think about that question and post your response in the chat. And then in a moment, we'll come back and talk a little bit about your responses. So I'd like to review the goals for today's workshop. And as I mentioned, this is a huge topic. So we've chosen a focus for today on some of the design fundamentals and designing for student experiences and outcomes that are equitable and effective, whether it is a capstone model or an internship model that is included in your pathways. We have held other events on other aspects of internships and capstones, including 2 on employer outreach and building strong relationships with employer partners. And those resources are linked in the resource guide for this event. So we will be sharing links to resources, as we always do during the workshop, but because there are so many, we prepared that resource guide, which was linked in the email sent out in advance. And we have just shared in the chat a link to that resource guide. And I'd encourage you to open that up. We will be using it later in the workshop during the breakouts. So you'll want to have access to that resource guide. And also just know that you don't have to worry about saving the links as they pop up in the chat. You have access to all of them in the resource guide. So you can take a look at the agenda for today and see a little bit about how we're going to provide some ways of thinking about important questions, design questions and implementation questions related to the basic definitions of capstones and internships, some issues pertaining to scheduling and logistics, and then some issues pertaining to student experiences and outcomes. And we're going to try to do that with efficiency so that you can have hopefully about a 20-25-minute session in your breakouts by experience level. So those breakouts for the new folks will be facilitated by Shireen or Dave or myself. And the breakout groups for the experienced folks will be self-facilitated. So I'm going to move us into some introductory content just to provide information that may be familiar, but that is really important for everyone working on pathways to understand contextually. So internships and capstones may sound like a straightforward topic, but when you examine the guiding principles and core characteristics, you can see how operationalizing an authentic 100+ hour culminating learning experience actually involves many of these principles and characteristics, including effective partnerships, connecting to career, work-based learning, preparing for credentials, enhanced student support, and certainly equitable access so that the educational benefits of internships and capstones are inclusive of and successful for students who've been historically underserved by traditional school systems and practices. So what's on the screen now are the defining criteria for internships. These come from the designation criteria document, and so they are likely familiar to you. And while giving you a chance to review these criteria, we're also going to share some basic resources, including a CCE resource, Preparing for Internship Experiences, the Elements of Model Internship Programs, which is a guide created by DESE to support internship design, and also the Work-Based Learning Plan Guide. In addition to those general resources, we've also gathered some resources from schools, and you'll be hearing more from Dave and Shireen later about the specifics of program design in their settings. But we'll share some resources from Uxbridge and also from Northampton. And we're really grateful to the educators who give us permission to share these resources in the IP community, I just want to remind anybody who might be utilizing those resources to please say thanks and give credit if you use them in the design of your own program. So now you are seeing the designation criteria related to capstones. And again, there are some general resources that you should be aware of if capstone design is part of your pathway. There are some sample capstone guides that have been compiled by CCE. And then we're also going to be sharing information on the Burlington High School pathway, information on the program and information designed for mentors. And again, Shireen will be talking about that when we get a little bit farther into our program. So we're going to turn now to a focus on some of the common questions. Some of these were posed when we invited questions when you registered for this workshop. Some of them come up in office hours and PLCs. So we have framed some key questions for consideration when you're thinking about the scheduling and logistical side of capstone and internship design. So things that have to do with outreach communication, transportation and other kinds of equitable access concerns, safety in the workplace, and tracking attendance and participation, and funding. So it is kind of a laundry list. There is a lot there. But as you look at these questions, I'd encourage you to begin to think about what are key questions, one of these or a related question that apply to your setting. There again are some resources in the resource guide that can help with these. And they include the information on safety from the Elements of Model Internship Programs Guide. And then a new resource that we recently came across from ASCA, which is a Promising Practices Guide that is a super helpful resource for lots of different aspects, including addressing safety concerns in internship and work-based learning settings. So what I'd like to do now is move forward to some slides and invite our guest facilitator and presenter to share those. And we're going to start going to Uxbridge High School. And you'll be able to see as we move forward, we've got the Uxbridge slide format and school colors. And that means it's time to hear from Dean of Students, Dave Mora.
All right, thank you, Annie. I appreciate the introduction, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for jumping on the call this morning. I know it's a busy time of the year, and the month of March is always a fun time in education. So this is my second year at Uxbridge High School. I've been a classroom teacher for 28 years, and I was involved in coaching for over 30 years. So I knew Mike Rubin for our days at Dighton Rehoboth, and when this position became available, I reached out to him and threw out an application. And when going through the interview process, I saw the job description, and it was only about let's say a couple sentences long. Mike's on the call right now; he could probably attest to that.
It was one line, Dave.
One line. Okay, I'll give you an extra credit. So, anyways, the internship here at the high school was sort of got. It'll disrupt. It was made like everything else during COVID. We wanted to bring it back and make it more robust, and I think that's, the primary goal is to continue to make that more robust. The question I get right from the get-go that I've met with so far is, how do you work this into your schedule? So what I did was I took a sample schedule of a student. We run a 7-day schedule. With dropping a period each day. I'm not sure how many of you out there use the same format or a similar format. So for instance, this student has 3 blocks of internship. They're basically, we're all seniors that do internships. I think we have one junior, and it's difficult to have underclassmen doing an internship because of their availability. They still have to finish up core requirements. There's not enough, they don't have as much wiggle room, let's say, of a senior. So essentially, these 3 blocks of internship are replacing electives that the student had opted to prefer to do internship with and drop those electives per se. So on day 1, let's say, first day, Monday's a day 1, A block, B block, and C block, first 3 periods of the day, that student will go out to his internship. This particular student is doing an internship within our district. So it's convenient for him as far as transportation goes. Some days he does have transportation on his own, and other days he doesn't. We provide transportation with one of the school vans. So it's easy for us to get him to and from that particular internship. So D block, a 4th period, will starts at 10:30. So that student will be back in school for his English class, or literature of war. And then he finishes up the rest of the day with his academic classes. The G block period, the 7th period of the day, is dropped that day. So he'll come to school. Now on day 2, what's interesting is he'll come to school for first period, and then he leaves for a part of the day, 2, 3, and 4, periods 2, 3, and 4. Period 4 is our lunch block, so that's a little bit longer. It's about an hour and a half. So he'll come back at 12:30 and finish up the day with his academics. And then, then you can, basically day 3, day 4, those internship periods will slide through the mid-morning, midday to early afternoon, and then finish up the day on internship. So that's sort of how we were able to work it into our schedule. It worked for us. It's working for us right now. I know other schools have used different formats because of their schedule. And basically, we were able to, with the flexibility with our school counselors and our building principal, we're able to pull this off. Our partners have been very generous with an understanding of the student schedule. Students sometimes will elect to stay after school and continue working on their internship, especially those who have paid interns, so they have an opportunity to make extra money if they desire. So that's basically how the schedule piece works. If there are any questions, you can throw them in the chat, or you can reach out. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat as well.
Thank you. That's generous of you, Dave. And the other thing I want to mention for questions is that there's a link to a Padlet. It's on the resource guide, and we'll be using that Padlet in the breakout rooms, but it has a place for questions. So if you have a question that you'd like the presenters to see, and also the everybody else who's participating today, we'll be capturing some questions there. We can try to address them in the latter part of the workshop. And then, Dave, I'm just going to click forward to these flow charts. As you know, I'm a big fan of these visual representations of your pathways. And I wanted to see if you wanted to comment on, from a little bit higher up than the daily schedule, what how the internships fit into the overall pathway structure.
So in the pathway structure, and Mike Rubin, our building principal, was here when this pathway, this designation went into play in year 1. He designed this particular curriculum map. I step in basically in year 3 now, and what we're doing, we're piloting a program called Career Readiness. It's a class that they take. It's an online platform. So students right now, currently juniors who would say they're in the manufacturing pathway, are taking that class in conjunction with the core classes that they're taking that you see before you. That's preparing them for their internship, and we're going to continue with that next year. Year 4 is actually where I step in. Well, at the end of the excuse me, at the end of the year 3, I'm meeting with these students in our pathways, and we're going to talk about where we can set them up for their internship in year 4. Their internship, sort of their cumulative, as you can see in the blue square down there, That's basically the culminating event of their internship is putting all their classroom experience into action. They do have the option to do a capstone project as well. I currently have two pathway students, engineering pathway students, who are doing a capstone project, and they're doing a work-based, the work-based learning virtual internship as well. So they're able to double dip and do both.
Great, thank you. And we'll have a chance to hear some more about those choices and how students culminate their pathway work when we get a little bit further on in the program. But I know that in Uxbridge, you have utilized the Emblaze app for tracking student participation. And I think that folks might like to hear a little bit about that before we pass to Shireen.
Okay, yeah. So Emblaze, I saw the link go up in the chat there. If you want to click on that, you can explore it for yourself. I'm going to call that, I don't work for Emblaze. I'm not making any money off of them by saying this, but they were a complete game changer for us in terms of tracking interns. One of the things I realized last year rather, was, aside from me actually visiting the students on the site, are they actually there? And one of the main features, and many features, but the main one is they log into this account, there's an app that they put on their phones, and they check, it's like a check-in feature when they arrive at their internship, and it pins them at the location where they checked in. And that way I know that they checked in, they're there, and it serves not only as an accountability piece, I know that they checked in, they got there safely, but I also know how many hours they're actually putting in. They also check out. I just saw a question pop up from Tara. We have to pay for that, which is paid through, I think we use grant money for that, but Mike can speak to that more so. Mike signs the checks for us. He's been great. I say, I need it. He buys it. He asks me how much, and he takes it from there. So the other feature that it brings, not only is it serves as a check-in and it pins their location, so they're not going to McDonald's or going home to play video games for a couple hours and coming back to school. It also keeps a list and a log of opportunities. So I have sort of a Rolodex, if you will, a modern Rolodex of opportunities. So when I punch in an opportunity with a student, that stays in the data system, and I can always go back to it if need be. Going back to the attendance piece, now we have our education interns who are doing an internship within the industry of education. Our STEM interns and our technology interns are all being paid through different various agencies. It also serves as a way to log their hours in. So every week I have to submit a timesheet for our education interns. It automatically defaults to a spreadsheet, and it calculates hours, and I have their timesheets within 10 minutes. Whereas before I would have to do a few hours worth of work, which only takes me about 10 minutes to do.
Thank you very much. So I want to turn things over to Shireen so that we can hear a bit about the flipped internship or capstone model in the computer science pathway in Burlington. Shireen, over to you.
And thanks, David. I actually learned a lot from you, so this is helpful. So my background, I actually was in industry, and I also worked at a nonprofit called Mass Technology Leadership Council that represented 600 technology companies. So I was the person representing companies, and schools would come to me asking to place high school students in internships. And most companies, really had the challenge that they wanted to do that, but they didn't have staff to supervise interns. The things that they needed done were more complex, and a lot of companies don't even take college interns until they're juniors or seniors, and then it's very competitive. So when I came to Burlington, we decided to solve that problem by making it possible for industry to be involved and for students to have some opportunities for networking, career aspiration, and real world experience. And what we did was we flipped things. We had students working here in Burlington at the high school, and we brought industry in to meet with the students. And we really co-founded this with 2 software engineers at MITRE who had done tutoring at Dartmouth, where they went to undergrad, and they really made a difference, helped get the program off the ground. How it works in terms of our scheduling, in Burlington, 4th quarter senior year, all seniors are able, if they're in good academic standing, they're all able to go out on an internship. So that structure was set in place. And so this is kind of a part of the overall school's structure. Within that, I'm really running a pathway in computer science. And again, we found it really hard to find 6 to 8 week internships in software engineering for high school students. So this is kind of, we pulled it out. So I'm part of the bigger 4th quarter program, but we have a separate process for really working with students. So the way that we do it, we have students work on a proposal idea. We have them meet together. We kind of qualify their ideas. We give them guidance. Actually, I'm Annie. I do have a link to, hold on, I have a link to all of the information on the different program opportunities that students can take advantage of. So that's a slideshow there for you. Oh, and thanks for having that up. So they can choose between app design, web design, learning Python. We've had students take Coursera IT courses and learn about IT. We've had students learn how to develop code using AWS, cloud computing, which is amazing to have on their resume. We have drones. We have a lot of students who love looking at drones and seeing how they can be applied to future problem solving. Some cybersecurity, and a lot of game design. So the way that it works then is that we recruit industry mentors. And I usually try to pair 2 mentors with 2 students. We do it every Friday at lunchtime. We found that Friday at lunch worked the best for engineers. It was easier for them to leave. We've also opened this up now to do it virtually as well. So we're getting some really high caliber mentors for these students. I mean, people that like are incredible to have access to. So we have these Friday meetings, and basically the mentor meetings are pretty short. We ask for mentors to meet for at least a half an hour. It's 6 to 8 weeks. We offer structure for each meeting. So each time they meet, there's a topic discussion. You know, whether it's how do you deal with project planning? How have you dealt in your career with a challenge where things didn't go the way you wanted them to go? How do you find your first job? So for each one, we have topics. And then we also offer students workshops on how to do a LinkedIn profile, how to do your resume, what is a project management tool like Trello, how do you use that? What is GitHub and how do you use that? So I'm trying to acquaint students with industry kind of standard terminology and tools that they can use. And actually, let me just post on here. For recruiting mentors, I have not had a difficult time, especially now that we're offering virtual. So I have just a flyer, oops, I put out. I find that mentors are really happy to contribute when the amount of time is manageable, that the expectations are clear and concrete, and that we provide support. I'm constantly going, into the different meetings. The mentors don't feel like they're off there alone. I did hear one program has mentors actually reflect on their meetings afterwards, and I think I'm going to incorporate that. I guess in a nutshell, that's it. But I have to say, it's so magical when I have these industry mentors meeting with students, and they're still here at Burlington High School, but the whole world is opening up in front of their eyes. And it's a scalable program. And this year we have over 40 students doing it. So it's great.
That's awesome, Shireen. Thank you so much for describing the creativity in that in your solution. And I'm seeing in the chat questions coming up about industry readiness and equity, and that is really going to be related to our next set of key questions to consider. So I want to kind of bring that conversation out of the chat and in live in the Zoom room. And Jennifer, I saw you were commenting, and also Mike. So Jennifer, would you like to address the room about those questions?
Sure. So as Lisa from Agawam noted, during the application process, when you're going through designation, we do ask you to describe the sort of immersive experience you're going to be providing for students. And we ask internship or capstone. There are obviously considerations that you have to make for your students, but we always want equitable access to be at the forefront of how you are advising students, how you're preparing students. So when I saw capstone might make sense for a student who's not industry ready, it made me wonder, why would a student not be industry ready? What are you doing to prepare students for that experience? And I know that Mike has noted there are, this only consideration when you're working with employers. Some of them might not be a great match for students. I know this is, with employers and educators, we are trying to learn a new common language for this. So it is something they're having to navigate in Uxbridge. And Mike, I don't know, would you want to talk about how you sort of handled that?
It's actually kind of a new animal, and I think it's something Shireen can probably talk to. She just mentioned it a little bit as well, that, when you have business folks that have a level of expectation, their definition of job ready and ours might be a couple of different things. And we need to temper the expectation sometimes of the employer that just because we've taught a certain degree of a program and there are some transferable skills doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's walking in as experienced as they think. And like Shireen's a computer science person and her kids know how to code, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can code every language or write code for a specific task. And just like our engineers, they might be able to manufacture in one particular realm, but when they go sit in another lab, there's still some onboarding that needs to take place. And I think when you are in a broader environment where you have multiple industry partners, it's impossible to tailor your curriculum to each and every individual one of those business partners. So we're trying to do the best we can with that concept of transferable skill.
And yeah, well said, Mike. And I think for us, the capstone really allows us to differentiate the experience for students. So even though we have high expectations, because the students are here with us, we can work more directly with them on, things like showing up on time. How do you collaborate? How do you work with open-ended problems? I mean, one of the biggest challenges kids have is when they're not giving assignments in classroom and they have to make some decisions about time management. And a lot of them really stumble and they come out of this saying, hey, I learned that time management is one of the most important aspects of being successful in a career. So the capstone for us has been helpful, but I think regardless, it all takes an incredible amount of adult supervision, oversight, empathy. And I think in structuring the program, that's right. I think that's what it boils down to, is the more we can put in, the better our results are.
That's a really good example of how something like a capstone, which might seem like an isolated element, actually really connects to enhanced student support and mentoring and advisement in different strands of the pathway. And it's a good transition to take us into the second set of key questions to consider. So you all just did a terrific job of modeling the kind of conversation that we hope you'll be able to have in your breakout rooms, focusing in on student experiences and outcomes. And I think the idea that we can differentiate student experiences while remaining committed to equitable student outcomes is a shorthand way of headlining these questions. lots of different elements of the internship or capstone design and implementation, including onboarding for students and families, onboarding for employers, pre-experience assessments, post-experience assessments, supporting student reflection, and accessibility of these experiences, how they can be designed to make them not just accessible, but inclusive and affirming for students with disabilities, English language learners, LGBTQ plus identified students, and others. So take a look at this list of questions, and also some of the resources related to designing inclusive and affirming capstones and internships that we're going to put into the chat. So they include some resources from the ASCA Promising Practices Guide mentioned earlier, as well as the NAEP Guide to Equity in Youth Apprenticeships. Those again are also found in the resource guide. So I want to briefly turn back to Dave and Shireen and see if you have comments that you want to make about these this category of questions before we get ready to go to breakouts in a moment. Shireen, is there anything that you want to add at this point?
We do have students do weekly reflections. I would say we're not doing a pre-assessment, so that's something to add. Employer onboarding, again, I've actually hired someone to help with that. And when I say employer, I mean mentor for us. And I will say it is a challenge to have a true equitable experience and to have all our ELLs and special needs students doing projects. And again, it really depends upon the support staff within the school to provide that support that each student needs. So, you know, in our school, it's not just me running it, it's really a whole school, you know, program.
Right. So building support across all the educators in the building.
Right. We're all in it.
And Dave, you had mentioned earlier some of the things that you're thinking about in Uxbridge in terms of the future of your programs. Can you talk a little bit about these questions?
Yeah, of course. Shireen, that was awesome. I wrote down a few things that I like to build into our program as well, and maybe reaching out to you to expand on some of those things. So that was great. Thank you. So always looking for ways to get better and make the program better. And you know, this is something that, you know, I've been sort of a punch list, if you will, to break away. As far as assessment goes, we also use reflection questions. I taught during the COVID shutdown, became really proficient with Google Classroom and during the hybrid year. So that's the platform I work from. We have, I think in one of my slides we have over 56 out of 100 students currently interning, and we don't meet as a class per se. So that's my basis of communication through email, through the Google Classroom format. We do meet in the beginning of the semester, and we'll meet at the end of the semester. But at any rate, that's kind of where that's how we assess. I also use the work-based learning skills assessment sheet. I pretty much took it right off their website. It basically helps the students track, work on 5 soft skill goals that's outlined, and then they pick job-specific skills as well. So that's another piece that I added to our program. Looking to really get into the credentialing and badging, we use a company called Lee. I spoke to Emblaze already, and we have a partnership, national network called the CAPS Network, which is based out of Kansas, who we're going to be visiting out in Utah at their conference. And again, just trying to bring more offerings, I guess, to our interns. I mentioned the career readiness course that we found, that we came across this summer and offered it up to our juniors this semester. And from the feedback I'm getting there, they're enjoying it. It's practical. And they're looking forward to using some of those skills they're learning in this career readiness course into steamroll into their internships. In terms of onboarding, what we've done, what we just did is we had a meeting with our junior class of 24. It's basically the course selection meeting that we have each year. And we spoke to the internship program and work-based learning and kind of went through the logistics of that. They're meeting with their school counselors. I am sending out a Google form of interest of interns and those who plan on doing an internship. And then from there, for much of the rest of the third and fourth quarter, myself and one of the other school counselors, and in conjunction with the Blackstone Valley Ed Foundation, we start pairing these students up with their partnerships. Some come with a partnership already. Now that we've established a little bit of a continuum of opportunities, we use that as well, and we're always obviously looking to build with other new partners in the area as well.
Okay, I'm going to pause you there, Dave, because we are going to get ready to go into our breakout groups. And as you know, these groups are going to be differentiated by level. You will be placed into a group. So you may be thinking, I have a question for Shireen and I'm in Annie's group, or I have a question for Dave and I'm in Shireen's group. So the Padlet is your resource to support being able to put a question out there that may not be able to be answered in your small group. So we are going to ask you to take a moment to look at the resource guide. Hopefully you're not feeling like you are drowning in new information, but that you actually have been pointed towards some areas that you might want to give consideration in terms of program design or program improvement in terms of making your internships and capstones more inclusive and more effective. So try to choose at least one question that is high priority for your pathways, and or one resource that has been shared today that you'd like to consider using and bringing in your setting. So the groups are you're going to be invited in a moment to join a group. Please make sure that you have access to that resource guide and can open the Padlet, because that's where you will be documenting your learning and your questions as we go forward. The Padlet is for everybody. It doesn't need to be a note taker or just the facilitator. We'd really love to see everybody reflecting on what you are taking away from today's session, as well as resources that would be helpful to you in your work on capstones and internships, and questions that you'd like us to try to answer when we come back together. I'd like to ask everybody to take a look at the Padlet. If there is something still on your mind that you are taking from the workshop today, please make a note of that. If you are thinking about resources, for example, other kinds of related topics that you would like us to plan a technical assistance event that would focus on that, or other resources that would be helpful to you, please note that on the Padlet. And then questions that you still have. So as you were pulled from your group conversation, and I apologize if it was an abrupt ending. It's always hard to end those groups. But the kinds of questions that you're left with is really important for us to know about. For example, there is a question in that Padlet about how workforce boards can support schools in establishing and implementing meaningful internship opportunities. And I know some of you had workforce mass hire reps in your groups and some did not. So is there anybody from a workforce board who would like to speak to this, or somebody from a school who has partnered successfully with your Mass Hire folks who could unmute and address that question about how workforce boards can help?
I can jump in a little bit on this, Annie, about what we've been doing so far to kind of help out our places. My name is Laura Robinson. I'm from Mass Hire, Franklin, Hampshire Workforce Board, and we cover Hampshire, Franklin County, and the North Quabbin. So we're as pretty rural, other than the Berks, as you can get. So one of the things we've been doing is we have a advanced manufacturing roundtable as the workforce board, and we are trying to incorporate that into our innovation pathways a little bit, so that we kind of help create a advisory group for all our advanced manufacturing schools. So that's one way. And then from those, we've also trying to get as many connections as we can to the schools is worked in MOUs that not just really ask for internships, but try to also get them to connect to the schools with those guest speakers, so that the manufacturers can see, yeah, you can help us out other than the internships, and at least use that as a way to open the door to get them involved. Figuring that they can, like, okay, if we get them in a little bit, they kind of get vested in, maybe the internships will eventually follow from those. We've also talked about the possibility, because transportation is an issue, and sometimes to get to a good place, it does take like 25 minutes to 30 minutes to get there. The idea of possibly doing some of the internships over the summer, so that this way we don't have this conflict of we have to get, so-and-so back to school for English class or things like that, so that they can have those internship opportunities and create some flexibility that way. So those are the ideas we've been throwing around with some of our partners and things like that.
Super helpful. Thank you, Laura. Anybody else want to comment on partnering with your local Mass Hire board? Okay, so there is also a question in the Padlet, and this is one that came up in the small group that I was in, about how to work effectively with established internship programs. So if you are partnering with an internship provider that has an established program and asking them to work with you on your innovation pathway, that may mean some changes in practice for that internship provider, using work-based learning plans or conducting assessment or reflection activities with your students. So we are wondering if there's anybody out there who has had experiences asking established internship programs to make adjustments to be part of innovation pathways, capstones, or internships.
Sorry, I was muted, Annie. Could you repeat that first part? I got cut off there.
Sure. So the question is about how to work with established internship providers. So if it's an organization or an employer that has an internship program up and running, and you're partnering with them for your innovation pathways students, how do you approach that, getting that organization to participate in what might be some new components, like using the work-based learning plan or other kinds of reflection and assessment practices?
Well, I think, the way that I've done it so far, I mean, again, I'm still rather new to this, and especially with the pathways, is in our group, in our breakout session, we talked about the application. There was an application that they used already, and there was some samples that were that we go to over here in our Blackstone Valley Ed Foundation. They had on their website, so we sort of married the two together, and it has well-defined expectations by the student, and the employer or the supervisor or the mentor will sign off on that piece, like they've read the expectations of the student. That's one of the sign-offs. There's a safety protocol, the insurance protocol, all that is built into the application. So that way, for that particular person, for that particular student, going into, let's say it's, the engineering pathways, those people are very familiar. They've already been into our buildings already. They've already made recommendations in terms of what type of equipment to purchase that students should be using, what types of devices they should be using. I wish I could be more specific, but I'm a history teacher, and I'm studying the labor. I'm teaching the labor movement of the Industrial Revolution of the early 1900s. So I'm not the one to give you specifics.
Yeah, one of the challenges of this work is sometimes educators stepping into realms of career pathways that are unfamiliar. So we understand that, and it sounds like you're talking about some of the good, clear communication, knowing what your ask is, starting small with partners, whether it's an employer partner or an internship provider that you're working with, so that you can gradually understand what the interests and needs are on both sides of that relationship and build from there. There are some other great questions in the Padlet. One requesting a checklist of what schools need to implement as part of an IP program. And for that, I would refer you to the DESE website and the final designation criteria document. And maybe one of my co-facilitators can put a link to that in the chat, because that one's not in the resource guide, but that's really where we would want you to look for an overview of pathway program elements. There are lots of resources in the toolkit on our technical assistance website that will help you with those, but the most concise statement is in the designation criteria document. And then I saw a question about wanting to see the end products of capstones. And Shireen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the link that you shared about your student capstone, the slide deck link that you shared, there are some links to student projects there. Am I right?
Yes. Do you want me to share that again?
That would be awesome, because I know we do have some folks who joined later, and they might, if they weren't here when you shared that link, they wouldn't see it.
And yeah, you have to scroll through, and then the different internship or capstone ideas are outlined, and then there should be links on some of those to student projects.
Super. All right. So are there other questions that anyone would like to put into the chat and hear from our presenters on, or unmute and ask your question? There is a question in the Padlet about how far in advance the planning for internships is done. Do any of our guest presenters or other experienced folks in the room want to talk about timelines for internship planning?
I could speak to that, because we're in the process of doing that for the class of 2024. So we just had a meeting doing course selections 2 days ago, I believe it was on Monday. I am sending out a interest form, a Google form of interest for for internship, those interested in doing internship or work-based learning, not just for the students in pathway classes, but students that might be going on to a 2 or 4 year school, or students that are going to be going right into the work field. So it covers everybody, the inclusiveness, the equity, range of learning. It involves, it's open to really anyone who's in good academic standing and, you know, that good and has the flexibility in their schedule. Really, that's the only, that's the criteria we have. So after that goes out, we compose a list. They meet with their school counselors, building their schedule. They get kicked over to me. We start partnering them up during the course of the spring. We try to get my goal is to get everybody partnered up before they leave in June, so they have their application, so they can go out and get that application filled out. So when they come back in September, their application, or they can drop it off during the summer. So I'm here 2 or 3 times a week during the summer. And then the September, we have a meeting just to kind of review the logistics, and they start their internships probably in the first or second week of school.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of a brief overview of it. That's how we did it last year. We're probably going to stick with that same model this year and see if we can look for ways to tweak it.
Mhm. Anybody else want to speak to that timeline?
I mean,
All
I
right,
would just say that I think beginning as soon as possible or sooner than you expect. And because it takes a lot of work to get all the kids up and ready and to find the employer partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Never too soon. Okay, let's go forward 2 slides, please, because as we get close to the end of our scheduled time, I want to make sure that we are informing everyone about some upcoming events. We have 2 PLCs on the calendar, and they are one next week on the 14th of March, which we're calling Who Pays for the Pizza? And that is a question that will actually open up conversation about just about anything related to funding, money coming in for your pathways, and spending. What are you spending? What kinds of money on in your pathways? So that's Who Pays for the Pizza. And then on the 4th of April, we'll also be hosting a PLC, inviting you to come together for dialogue about incorporating student voice and student data in your pathway design and development. So those PLCs are intended to really facilitate dialogue. They are co-led by peer ambassadors from the field. We hope you'll consider attending that. And then on the 12th of April, we are hosting a webinar called You're a Designee, Now What? And the target audience for that will be the folks from schools who are just now finishing the Part B application and interview process and looking towards new pathway designation this spring. As Jennifer mentioned in the chat, we will also have a webinar for new applicants, so folks who are even earlier in the process. And if you're on our listserv, you'll get information about that. It's not yet on the website, but it will be soon. And thank you, Phoenicia, for sharing that link. We look forward to seeing you at future events, and we always want to hear what kinds of events are of interest to you. So in that spirit, if we can go to the next slide, please. We want to provide time during the workshop for you to complete this survey. We have found that doing this increases our response rate, and it is super important to us to hear your feedback. So if you click on the link that's been shared by Phoenicia in the chat, that will take you to our SurveyMonkey feedback survey. As a further incentive to complete this, what we have set up is a raffle. So your survey responses are anonymous, but after you complete the survey, you'll be asked to give your email, and that will enter you in a raffle at the end of the year for Amazon gift cards. Every time you attend an event and complete a survey, you are entered again in this raffle. And we hope that that encourages you to take the time and provide some feedback on today's session, as well as whatever your thoughts are about other kinds of supports we can provide the IP community. So while you are diving into your surveys, I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who came out today for the workshop, and hope that both the content provided and the opportunity to discuss in breakout groups was enriching for you. I want to give special thanks to our guest presenters and facilitators, Shireen and Dave, for bringing their experiences in the field to our program. We couldn't do this work without you, and we really appreciate you. And with that, we are going to get ready to close out the session for today and hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. That was great.
Thanks.